John Travolta once made an entire country believe a man could dance his way out of any kind of darkness. White suit, glowing floor, a whole room watching him move, like nothing in the world could touch him. But here's the question nobody really asks. What happens to a man like that when the music actually does stop? Because behind the disco lights, behind the leather jacket, behind that famous grin, John Travolta has buried three of the people he loved most. And somehow, at 72, he's still walking, still working, still showing up. So how does a man carry that much loss and still find a reason to get up in the morning? Stick with me, because this story isn't really about a movie star. It's about a father. And if his story means something to you, drop a like before we start. For the boy from New Jersey, and for everything he's had to survive since. Let's go back to the beginning, because you can't understand the man without understanding the house he came from. John Travolta was born on February 18, 1954, in Englewood, New Jersey, the youngest of 6 kids in a home that was never, ever quiet. Picture that for a second. 6 kids means 6 sets of shoes by the door. 6 voices talking over each other at dinner. Doors slamming. Someone always rehearsing a line or humming a tune in the next room. His dad, Salvatore, was a hard-working Italian-American guy who ran a tire business and believed in showing up and putting in the hours. His mom, Helen, was the opposite kind of influence. She'd been a singer and an actress herself before she became a drama teacher, and she filled that house with the idea that a voice, trained right, could stop a room cold. So young John grew up in this strange, beautiful mix of hustle and performance. Somebody was always practicing something. A song drifting from upstairs. A line being corrected at the kitchen table. His mother teaching him, without ever really teaching him, that confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one rehearsal at a time. By the time he hit Dwight Morrow High School, he still looked like any other New Jersey teenager. But something in him was already leaning toward Manhattan, just across the river, close enough to dream about, and far enough to be terrifying. And here's the wild part. He didn't wait. John dropped out of high school as a junior to chase acting. Think about that for a second. No safety net, no guarantee, just a teenager grabbing a coat and walking out the door toward a city that swallows people whole every single day. That's not a small decision. That's a kid betting his entire future on a feeling. Manhattan didn't roll out any red carpet for him. It gave him waiting rooms, tired feet, auditions where nobody even looked up. But he kept showing up anyway. He toured with a production of Grease, long before it became the movie everybody knows, learning how to hold an audience night after night, without ever letting the energy go flat. Right around his 20th birthday, he landed on Broadway in a show called Over Here. That's Broadway. No do-overs, no editing, just you. Live. In front of people who can feel it the second you falter. Then Hollywood started to notice. A small but eerie role in Carrie, in 1976, cracked the door open. But it was television that really put his face into American living rooms, playing Vinnie Barbarino on Welcome Back, Kotter, from 1975 to 1979. And almost overnight, this kid from Englewood became someone strangers felt like they already knew. Fan mail piled up. People screamed his name in the street. And here's something worth sitting with. That kind of sudden love can feel amazing, but it can also start to box you in. A catchphrase becomes a cage. People fall in love with an image before they've even met the actual person underneath it. Still, he kept climbing. And then came the moment that changed everything. 1977, Saturday Night Fever. That white suit under the disco lights wasn't just a costume, it became a symbol of an entire era. Tony Manero, dancing like the only power he had in the world, was on that floor, under those lights, for the length of one song. It earned John his first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. A year later, Grease hit theaters, and Danny Zuko in that leather jacket turned him into something even bigger than a movie star. He became part of family memory. Parents who saw it in theaters would later watch it with their own kids. Then came Urban Cowboy in 1980, then Blowout in 1981, proving there was real weight behind the charm. not just rhythm and a good smile. But here's what the posters and the red carpets never showed you. While all of this was happening, while America was falling in love with him, John was quietly living through the first devastating loss of his adult life. Her name was Diana Hyland. He met her while filming a TV movie called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, and even though she was older and already an established actress, something real grew between them. Diana was also fighting breast cancer at the time, and that fact gave their relationship a kind of urgency most young couples never have to deal with. In 1977, the very same year Saturday Night Fever was turning him into a household name, Diana passed away. Reports say John flew back to be with her, and that he was there in her final moments. He later described it in the simplest, most heartbreaking way possible. He said he felt the breath go out of her. Now sit with that for a second. This was a man on the edge of becoming one of the biggest stars on the planet, and at the exact same time, he was sitting beside a hospital bed, watching someone who believed in him more than almost anyone slip away. The world saw a rising star. Privately, he was a young man learning that grief doesn't wait for a convenient moment. It just arrives, whenever it wants, and you're expected to keep functioning anyway. And that's exactly what he did, because that's what fame demands. Premieres kept happening. Interviews kept happening. The applause never stopped, even when part of him clearly wanted to. Fast forward a bit, and Hollywood, as it always does, started to move on. Disco faded. Tastes changed. Roles got harder to find. The 1980s were quieter for John professionally. A stretch where the phone rang less, and the offers got smaller. That's a brutal kind of pressure most people never talk about. Being famous enough that everyone still recognizes your face, but not famous enough anymore that the industry is fighting over you. He kept working through it. Look Who's Talking, in 1989, brought him back into the mainstream conversation. But it was 1994's Pulp Fiction that really flipped the script. Playing Vincent Vega wasn't just a role, it was a reintroduction. Audiences got to see him completely differently. Slower, darker, more unpredictable. It earned him a second Oscar nomination, and Get Shorty, the following year brought him a Golden Globe. The comeback was real. But comebacks like that don't happen in a vacuum. They're built on years of quiet uncertainty that nobody claps for. While all of this professional back and forth was happening, John was also building something steadier at home. He married actress Kelly Preston in 1991, and together they had 3 children. Jet, born in 1992, followed by Ella Blue and Benjamin. For the first time in a long time, it seemed like John had found something more permanent than applause. Then, in 2009, tragedy hit the family in the cruelest way imaginable. The Travoltas were vacationing in the Bahamas when their oldest son, Jet, just 16 years old, suffered a seizure and passed away. 16. Think about everything that's still supposed to be ahead of a kid at that age. Birthdays, graduations, first jobs, all of it. Gone in an instant, in the middle of what was supposed to be a family holiday. There's no soft way to talk about that kind of loss. A hallway in a resort becomes a place you can never quite look at the same way again. A suitcase, packed for a trip home, suddenly means something completely different. And here's the thing about grief like this. The world doesn't stop to let you catch your breath. John still had cameras pointed at him. He still had a career to keep moving. But at home, everything had changed. Jet's age froze at 16, while everyone else around him kept getting older, kept having birthdays, kept moving forward in a world he was no longer part of. John and Kelly didn't try to bury that pain quietly. They turned it into something. They started the Jet Travolta Foundation, channeling their grief into support for kids with special needs. It wasn't a cure for the loss. Nothing could be. But it gave them a way to keep his name moving forward in the world, doing some good. Then in 2010, a bit of light returned when Benjamin was born. Now, let's be honest about something here. A new baby doesn't replace a child you've lost. It doesn't erase the empty chair or make the grief disappear. But it does mean there's a small life in the house again that needs you. Needs breakfast made. Needs bedtime stories. Needs someone showing up every single day. And John and Kelly leaned into that. doing everything they could to protect Ella and Benjamin from as much pain as two parents possibly could. You'd think that would be enough tragedy for one family. It wasn't. In 2020, Kelly Preston passed away at 57, after quietly battling breast cancer, the very same disease that had taken Diana Hyland from him decades earlier. Let that sink in for a moment. The same illness, twice, on opposite ends of his life, taking two women who loved him deeply. John's public statement was short, careful, dignified. He simply said her love and her life would always be remembered. But you have to imagine what wasn't said. The small, ordinary questions that disappear when someone's gone. Did you eat yet? How was the flight? Will you be home in time for dinner? Those tiny exchanges are the real glue of a marriage. And when they're gone, the silence that's left behind is deafening, even in a house that still looks exactly the same on the outside. Ella, his daughter, wrote something beautiful after losing her mom. She said, "Kelly had made life so beautiful." That's the kind of tribute that tells you everything about what that family lost. And Benjamin, still young, still needed his father to be steady, to keep showing up, even while carrying all of that weight himself. So how does a man survive something like this? Not one loss, 3. A partner during his rise to fame, a teenage son taken far too soon, and then, decades later, a wife of nearly 30 years, lost to the exact same disease. Here's where the story gets interesting, because John didn't disappear. He leaned into something that had always mattered to him: flying. Turns out, he's a genuinely serious aviator, trained and licensed to fly large commercial-style aircraft. In 2026, on his 72nd birthday, he actually earned another aviation milestone: a Global Express pilot license. Not exactly the kind of headline you'd expect from a Hollywood legend, but maybe that's the point. Flying gave him something grief couldn't touch: controls, procedure, a runway ahead of him, a reason to focus completely on the next few minutes instead of everything he'd lost. That same year, he brought flying and family together in a deeply personal project, a film connected to aviation and childhood memory, which he wrote, directed, produced, and narrated himself, with his daughter Ella appearing alongside him. It premiered at Cannes in May 2026, where he received an honorary Palme d'Or, and it made its way to streaming audiences shortly after. When he spoke about the project, he didn't dress it up. He said life had genuinely tested him, and he dedicated the film to Kelly, to Jet, and to the family that raised him. That's not a man pretending to be fine. That's a man being honest about carrying it all forward anyway. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the white suit, not the leather jacket, not the Oscar nominations. The real story is a father who kept walking through rooms that used to be full and are now quiet. Strohs, a man who's had to relearn, over and over, how to live in a house after someone he loved stopped being in it. He still appears on red carpets. He still flies. He still works. But if you really want to understand John Travolta, don't look at the highlight reel. Look at the quieter moments. A chair that stays empty a little longer than it should. A photograph he pauses on for just a second too long. A father stepping outside because, somehow, the day still has to continue. The world will always remember him dancing. That image isn't going anywhere. But maybe the deeper tribute is remembering the man behind it. The one who kept getting back up, kept showing up for his kids, kept finding a reason to move forward, even after losing so much of what made his house feel like a home. If this story moved you even a little, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment about what stuck with you, and share this with someone who might need a reminder that resilience isn't about never breaking. It's about what you do after you do.